Is South Africa becoming, or is it a mafia state? The 2021 assassination of Babita Deokaran in the Gauteng Department of Health showed that anyone who was willing to expose syndicates inside the state was in danger of being killed. The University of Fort Hare's Vice Chancellor and the outgoing Eskom CEO have both reportedly survived assassination attempts recently. Political killings are commonplace in KwaZulu-Natal, and grassroots activists have blamed the deaths of leaders on politicians who want them out of the way. Well, we're now joined by Dr. Imraan Buccus. He's written that South Africa has to deal decisively with organised crime. He's a senior research associate at the Auwul Socio-Economic Research Institute, ASRI. Thank you for being with us. Is South Africa a mafia state?
Well, thanks, Francis. Thanks for having me. Well, all indications are that we are moving towards becoming a mafia state. I think people were just horrified at those attempts on the Ruyter and Professor Buhlungu. You know, if we want our state, a functioning developmental state, to prosper, then clearly we need to get the basics right. I mean, every South African today is talking about electricity and, by extension, water, essential services, etc. And of course, universities are the intellectual hubs of our society. And if we're not able to get those right and deal with people who are quite clearly intent on destabilizing our developmental state, then it means that we're going to lose the finest in our society. Our finest and brightest are going to leave, and it's going to mean complete devastation for a society like ours.
Yeah.
And I think a society that many people have had really high hopes for.
Indeed. And I mean, sometimes you have groups working from outside, maybe the construction mafia, who threaten people on building sites. But you're talking about organised criminals or organised crime that's infiltrated the state. I mean, to what extent has that happened, where these syndicates are part of the state, part of the institutions that should stop crime, and part of politics?
I mean, Francis, it's not completely surprising, right? In developed societies like Italy, in parts of the US in the 30s, and clearly in many post-colonial societies, Mexico, parts of Africa, parts of Asia, there often is a very fine line between the underworld, the state, and the corporate world. And all of this is about ensuring that they loot the public purse. And this goes back even to, and it's the point I make in the recent piece, it's even something that goes back to the ANC in exile. You know, the nature of exile really meant that the ANC, even in those early years, had to work with the underworld. Of course, in a completely different context, in ensuring that weapons and other necessities were brought into the country. One would have thought that in a post-apartheid state that we would have dispensed with that. But there clearly is a greater institutionalization of the underworld in organs of state. And I think we're seeing that with Eskom, we're seeing that in other institutions, how supply chain is being contaminated by the underworld, and how ultimately all people want is to loot the public purse. And the other point I make in the piece is we're fast becoming like countries like Mexico, where assassinations are quite common. And very often it's linked to this kind of intersection between state and the underworld.
And it's been linked to some of the damage that we've seen at Eskom, the SIU talking about trucks pitching up with good quality coal, and it's swapped for poor quality, or even rocks. It's incredible. You say that under Zuma, the ANC was brazenly aligned with these mafias. President Ramaphosas, you say, has failed to take them on. What do you think he knows and doesn't know in terms about what is going on? Some have criticized the president for being quiet on political killings in KwaZulu-Natal, for example.
Yeah, no, for sure. Political killings, assassination of people in grassroots organizations, etc. I think it's a different world for Zuma, for Ramaphosa, sorry. It's a different world for our politics. I think in large part, Ramaphosa may have felt constrained, prior to the last elective conference. Now that he's had overwhelming support, he has an NEC where the balance of forces are in his favor. I think all South Africans across the class spectrum are looking forward to Ramaphosa acting decisively and not being the sort of indecisive president that we've seen over the last few years.
Let's look at solutions. You've called for special courts to deal with corruption and what you call treason. I mean, you mentioned the word treason. Should people who steal cables that affect power stations and even robots who affect the train network, should they be charged with treason?
No, absolutely. I think all of these people are having a huge impact on our national interest. Eskom is a public utility. It supplies electricity. Universities are the intellectual hubs of our society. I mean, it's just kind of, crazy to have vice chancellors moving around with bodyguards, in institutions that are meant to be about knowledge production. But here too, like in Fort Hare, it's about the mafia or the underworld and corrupt people wanting to loot what is the public purse. So certainly I think it's treason. And I think our institutions of state, our security institutions need to be dealing decisively and need to be dealing with it in that way. The other point I make is about the media. I think the media is a central pivot in our democracy together with civil society. And we've seen how these two arms, civil society and the media, have done incredibly well, in exposing corruption, in dealing with corruption. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the same rigor when dealing with assassinations. And I might add, perhaps, provocatively, that in large part, the assassinations have affected, in the earlier years, poorer working class Black people. And we haven't seen the sort of intent focus of the media on that, on assassinations. But now with the fact that it affects, with the attempted assassination of Ruyter, with Buhlungu, and when we saw the assassination of Babita Deokaran, it's coming to the middle class world, and we're seeing greater attention being focused on it. I certainly think that the media should be playing and have more investigative units looking like it does corruption, looking also more at assassinations in our country.
All right, thank you. And we take that critique. I was going to bring up the media very quickly. What about the other institutions? Justice, the prosecuting authority, the police. If we push back as a country, do we have the capacity to do so?
Well, I think our police minister has earned the wrath of many South Africans, again, across the spectrum of South Africa. I know he's earned himself a place in the new, post-conference dispensation. But I really think that, our police minister is not doing what he needs to be doing. And together with the other institutions of state, like the prosecutorial authority, I think, when we start to see more people behind bars, there's been a critique of that approach. But I think when we start to see more people behind bars, then South Africans will feel a greater sense of optimism. We can't doubt that there's an overwhelming sense of pessimism in the country right now.
All right, thank you very much. ASRI Senior Research Associate Imraan Buccus.